The show is brought to you by Wendy's. When it comes to making the best hamburgers around, basics matter. And Wendy's, well, they've got those burger basics on lock, and boy, does it show. So what's the secret to all those hot and juicy hamburgers? Simple. Wendy's always crafts their burgers with that fresh, never frozen beef they're famous for. The result, hot and juicy, beefy hamburger perfection every single time. No matter which burger you order from the Wendy's menu, you already know that thanks to those Wendy's burger basics, it's going to be exactly what you were craving. I mean, as long as what you crave is a hot and juicy burger. So a hamburger made fresh just for you, not waiting for you. After all, the perfect burger doesn't spend time waiting around. So you want a hot and juicy hamburger made fresh just for you, it's gotta be Wendy's. Fresh is essentially their thing. Fresh beef available in the contiguous U.S., Alaska, and Canada, not available in Hawaii. Welcome in to Andy and Ari on 3. In for Andy and Ari, myself, Jake Buckel, and the man, the myth, the legend. Glad to have him here in Nashville. You might know him as SEC Mike, but Mike Bratton from that SEC podcast. What's up, man? Thanks for making time to jump on here on a Monday morning and talk some ball. Dude, we're stoked to have you in studio.
Yeah, I just hope I don't lose your entire audience here without Andy and Ari here. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, I'm not a regular here either. So we're both essentially just in the temp seat. That's a substitute teacher for today's show for Andy and Ari on their way back from some well-deserved R&R. But man, we got a lot to jump into. It's the off season. I put in air quotes. You and I both know there's always something happening in the world of college football, and you have the best SEC podcast, best SEC show in the business. I want to tackle specifically a bunch of topics across the Southeastern Conference with you today. First things first, y'all, make sure you are subscribed here to the On3 YouTube channel. Andy and Ari bringing you a show every single weekday morning with myself as well, producing a lot of content here on the channel for you. Man, we got a ton to jump into, but one thing I wanted to start with you, Mike, the college football playoff going to change. Ross Dellinger reported, I believe it was last Sunday, that the SEC Big Ten throwing their weight around, probably both going to get it right around 4 auto bids. I want to get your take on this because I heard that it made sense. But if I'm the SEC, does 4 auto bids not limit their potential to have even more teams in the playoff? Because you also give some more bids to the Big 12 and the ACC. And at that point, you're like, okay, well, that in itself is 12 spots.
Right.
And then you give another spot to the G5. It's like, what's your take on this? If you're the SEC, is that the right move? What's the number you would go for?
I thought we were getting away from participation trophy and awards and all this stuff, you know? So when I heard 4 automatic every year, I'm right there with you. I hated it. And I thought that meant minimum 4. But I think you're right. It may just be max of 4 because we don't know how big the playoff's getting.
Yeah.
Is it getting to 14? Is it getting to 6? If they go to 14 and Big 10 gets 4, obviously SEC gets 4, spots are running out quick.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's fair. And I'm the biggest SEC homer out there. I don't think they deserved 4 this year.
Yeah.
Now, more often than not, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think you're hitting on something important. I think most years, if it goes to 14, especially if it goes to 16, the SEC is going to deserve 5, 6. There may even be years where they deserve 7.
Yeah.
Probably not many, but 4, I don't understand limiting it. And I hate this idea that they're tossing around of a potential championship weekend because what you're going to do is you're going to have, again, potentially 6 to 7 SEC teams that are capable of winning a national championship. And instead of letting them try to earn that on the field against the rest of the country, they're going to knock each other off. I don't understand the logic in that.
That's going to be really curious to see how they put that together with like the play-in weekend versus conference title weekend. But to go back to what you were saying, if you look at the final college football playoff rankings from the end of this regular season or the end of, the conference title weekend, you had 6 SEC teams in the top 15. And for those of you that are still trying to piece together the math of what we're talking about here, if you go to 14 teams, you would have 4 teams from the SEC already spoken for, 4 teams from the Big Ten already spoken for. Okay, so you're at 8. What it sounds like right now, Big 12 and the ACC could be in the range of getting 2 spots guaranteed each. Again, this is all, pending some confirmation from the powers that be. So you're at 12. G5 probably gets a spot in there too, so you're at 13. There's 1 at-large spot that's probably for Notre Dame.
Right.
And if you're Ole Miss, South Carolina, Alabama, and I'm not lobbying for any of those teams to have gotten in from this season. I get the committee's logic, but if I'm one of those teams, like, whoa, hey, we why are we limiting ourselves if we're expanding the play? Like, hey, let's give ourselves as much room as possible to go get our. And if I'm Greg Sankey, I'm like, I want as many SEC teams as possible as well.
Right. And another point that I think is being overlooked, and again, I'm the biggest SEC homer out there. I want all the SEC teams in there so that we can get an SEC champion. But there's going to be years where the ACC doesn't deserve to. I mean,
sure, yeah,
we could be getting the number 24 team in the country. We're putting them in because the ACC's got to have 2, and we're knocking the SEC team that's ranked 9th out of the playoff. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Now, there's going to be years where the ACC probably deserves 3, maybe even 4. If the ACC, I don't know how this would never happen, but if it did, if the ACC had 4 of the top 10, put them in there.
Yeah,
that's what this sport is. You get earning on the field. Now, going back real quick to that championship weekend, instead of Georgia, Texas, what they should have done last year and what they should do moving forward, it should be someone like Alabama, Ole Miss
playing each other for a spot.
One playing game.
Yeah.
And if you win it, you're in. You get that last bid out of the SEC. I'm in favor of that. I was down there for Atlanta for the Texas Georgia game, and it was a great game. Went down to the wire, but there was no juice with that game because both those fans knew there's more to be played. It was. I don't know. It was the most lackluster SEC championship game I've ever experienced.
And to be fair to what you were just saying, like if I'm Georgia and Texas, to put another point on it, Carson Beck gets hurt at half of that game.
Right.
In hindsight's 2020, I think Notre Dame was a force this year in the playoff. Like I'm not insinuating Georgia would have gone further than they did.
I'll say it. They would have beat them.
You think so? You think there would be Notre Dame? Really? Okay.
Well, the SEC didn't win. I got to have an excuse somewhere. That's one of my excuses I got right there.
I love it. I mean, it's all hypothetical, right?
Right.
It's all hypothetical, but no,
Can't prove me wrong.
Yeah, you can't prove the guy wrong at that point. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the other part. Like if I'm a top 2 team in the SEC and I'm Greg Sankey, I don't want my best horses having more tread on the tires. Like I want them to be as fresh as possible. Now, of course, no team with a bye from this past playoff won their college football playoff game, so we'll see how that whole thing ages. But
shout out real quick, Lane Kiffin,
please,
for saying, we don't want to go to the SEC champ. They took care of that themselves. Way to go, Kiffin. Did a good job. Didn't have to play in that SEC championship.
Yeah, he I guess crossed those T's and dotted those I's, if you want to put it that way. So Mike, last thing I want to say about this, if it were me, if I were just overseeing college football in general, regardless of conference, I'd love to see just no auto bids. Like I'd love to see it be about teams. Let's reward those teams, not reward conferences. Where do you fall on that? What's the perfect way to approach it if you're, overseeing? They make you the commissioner. Mm-hmm. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I love that idea. I don't know what the number is. I was one of those people. I was fearful going to 12 was going to invalidate some of the regular season, and it did to a small extent. Like Ohio State, Michigan, that would have killed Ohio State in years past. Obviously, didn't, and they won the national championship. But there were so many games at the tail end of the season. Ole Miss, Florida. That was essentially a playoff game for Ole Miss. They fell short. Tennessee, Vanderbilt. That was essentially a playoff game for Tennessee. Yeah. On and on and on. We could go down the list. There were so many great games at the end. So I think we're in that sweet spot. 14. I guess if they expand, that's the number I want because I don't want it to go to 16 and we're kind of invalidating the regular season. But I'm right there with you. Get rid of the auto bids. I think that's foolish. I think that's un-American, quite frankly. Give me the best 14. Let them play it out on the field. I thought that's what we were doing.
Free market.
Yeah.
Right. Let's let them handle it in between the lines. And one more thing to say too. I know we keep going down a rabbit hole here, but I'm like, man, if it was the 14 playoff and Ohio State misses it because of the Michigan game, what happens with Ryan Day?
He's gone.
Does he leave on his own? Does Ohio State say we want to part ways? Like that whole discussion is super interesting because of the multiverse that it was. But instead, 12-team playoff, they do what they do when they win the national championship. So I don't know. College football powers that be. SEC Mike is ready to be your commissioner whenever you want to make that happen. So we talked about the playoff a little bit. I want to pivot to this other thought though around the playoff as it pertains to the SEC. A lot of intrigue across the conference this year, Mike. You got a bunch of new quarterbacks. You got a bunch of young quarterbacks going into their second year as the guy. I think that Florida has got to make the playoff this year. I think with all the openness, if you will, of the conference, like Texas, new quarterback, Georgia, new quarterback, Alabama, new quarterback. Those are the top 3 teams when it comes to odds to win the conference. Right. They're the team that I would probably look at most closely, not from a perspective of Billy Napier has to make the playoff or he's in jeopardy of losing his job. I think it's, hey, if you don't make the playoff right now with this window you have, I don't know if you're going to have a better chance with DJ Lagway. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think DJ Lagway, I don't know if he's the best quarterback in the country next year, but I'm almost certain he will be by his junior year. Like, I think he's on that fast of a rise. He came in immediately, made a huge impact. Who knows how their season would have played out if Graham – I'm not happy that Graham Mertz got injured.
Yeah.
Had he not gotten injured, maybe they beat Tennessee. Of course, DJ Lagway come in there and looked really good. So, but he's a superstar, and I think he could be the best player in the country next year. You're right. And this is – with that schedule, though, it's difficult. And this is where if I'm Billy Napier, I'm so happy that we've got this revenue share coming, and we can't afford to fire coaches right now and pay the buyout. So let's shift that money to players.
Yeah.
And that is clearly what they have done in recruiting and the transfer portal. They're going all in. LSU is another one. So there's a lot of coaches I think are saving their hide, so to speak, because of this revenue shares coming. People don't know where this sport is going, so that they're going all in on the field. But you're right. I mean, they just won 8 games, and they're building him a statue. I remember Steve Spurrier, they ran him off for winning, what was it? What did he go? 11-1, I think, or 10-2 his last year. Urban Meyer, the same thing. 10 wins is not enough for this fan base. Now we're here, year 4, winning 8 games, and Billy Napier's being, they're holding parades for him. You know what I mean? So, yeah, they've got to take a step up. The excuses are over. If you got the best quarterback in the SEC, you better do something with it. But unfortunately for them, I love the SEC expansion. I love getting Oklahoma and Texas in here. But one problem, the imbalance of the schedules.
Sure.
If you gave Florida Missouri schedule,
oh my gosh,
Ole Miss schedule or Tennessee schedule, they're in the playoff.
With
the schedule
100%.
they have now, they may not make a bowl game. You know what I mean? Like, it's that daunting.
That's kind of, I think, like a double-edged sword here. Looking at that schedule, Florida and maybe Oklahoma is the other team I would put in this category. 9-3 for them. You don't want to be 9-3, but with that schedule where you play LSU, Texas, A&M, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, like, if you can go 9-3 with that schedule and have it look the right way, like, Florida may backdoor their way into the college football playoff because of how difficult that is.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be right on that cutting edge. I think for that, a team like them, we got to see how hot they are at the end of the year.
Sure.
Like, that's why I think South Carolina, now would they have made some noise in the playoff? Who knows? But I think South Carolina should have been in. They won their final 6 games, beat Clemson, which made the playoff at Clemson. Those are the teams that deserve to get in when they're playing. I know they lost to Alabama. I know they lost to Ole Miss, but they never lost a game there on out. So if Florida can do something similar, even like you're saying, if they lose 3 games, but maybe they win their final 4, final 5 games, I think we should reward the teams that are hot going into the college football playoff.
I don't think that's crazy to say, especially with the way that the playoff is changing. Like, if we even expand it to 16, 20, like however many teams this is going to go to, there has to be, I think, some just nuance to how we evaluate these teams, to where, okay, if a team's playing the best at the end of the season, that probably deserves a little bit of credibility with the committee. So I'm curious to see how they evaluate that here going forward. I gave you my team, Mike, who I think needs to make the playoff from the SEC. Are you doubling down on Florida with me? Who's the team that you're like, hey, bro, this has got to be the year where they get in from the SEC?
The number one that I hear from, and I don't think they're going to do it, is LSU.
Really? You're out on LSU? Okay, yeah.
Well,
let's talk about that.
I'm not saying out, but I just don't know. I don't think Brian Kelly is an elite coach. I think he is very, very, very good, but I don't think he's elite. We live in a world where, like, you're elite or you're trash.
Sure.
I don't buy into that. His resume is what it is. It's an outstanding track record, but is he a championship coach? Heck, I think Notre Dame upgraded with old Marcus Freeman. I think they hired the wrong Notre Dame coach down there at LSU. But again, will they? They're another one. Like I said, I don't think they would have fired him, but things were going sideways on him, yelling at players on the sideline. Is he a fit down there? I think that's starting to bubble up. They're all in. They're bringing back Garrett Nussmeier, which I think is the perfect move for him. I think it's the perfect move for LSU. They're going in the portal. This is a year after he said, well, we don't buy players. Now he's paying to buy the players.
There we go.
How many coaches are putting up their own money unless if Kirby Smart's not giving his own money because things are going well. Sarkisian's not giving his money because he doesn't have to. Brian Kelly's got to do it.
Yeah.
If they don't make the playoff, I think this could be the final year for Brian Kelly at LSU.
Wow. Really? This year? I mean, so I am a lot more bullish on LSU for what you just said. Garrett Nussmeier, the portal. But if we live in a world where we're sitting here this time next year, Mike, and it's like, hey, LSU missed the playoff with the best returning quarterback, the most proven commodity in the conference, the guy who threw for over 4,000 yards last year, it'd be uncomfortable. And I've been the guy here that sat here for the better part of the last couple of years and said it's a matter of when, not if, LSU wins a national title under Brian Kelly. And if they don't get it done this upcoming season, kind of the same vibe, like not they have to win the national title, but just to make the 12-team field.
Right.
Like if they can't do that in this conference, I'd have my questions.
I think
I'd have my questions.
I hope it's 50 years from now. I don't wish ill on anybody. But when Brian Kelly passes, may he rest in peace, it's going to be on his grave. They had Jay Nails, Malik Neighbors, all these guys, and they didn't even make the college football playoff. What a waste. I think that's going to be his legacy at LSU.
That's a brutal tombstone. If that's I mean, somebody in the Kelly family's got to make something happen. If that's also a lot of names. I mean, that's Daniel's Neighbors.
I mean, it was the best offense in the country.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a season ago, they had a national title level offense. And this is, I mean, sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
And they lost 3 games.
Ridiculous.
Come 100%. On. That's an elite coach.
And that's the problem, I think, if I'm an LSU fan, is like, hey, we have this awesome offense, but what has LSU always been known for is their defense. Like, you think LSU, you think Honey Badger, you think Glenn Dorsey, you think bad intentions downhill, and they've sort of lacked that for the better part of the last couple seasons. Now, it took a step forward last year, obviously, with the new defensive coordinator, but yeah, man, just I think 2019 for a lot of us made us just assume, hey, if LSU gets a quarterback,
right,
they won a national championship, and we've had a quarterback now the last couple of seasons, and it hasn't been the case. Moving on to another team that I want to get your take on here, because you are a Tennessee guy.
Yeah,
you are as dialed in as it comes when talking about the Vols. What's your pulse on Tennessee in 2025?
I think they're in the toughest spot in the sport because they're not championship worthy, but they're close. And getting that next step after years and years and years of futility, they are an upper echelon SEC program, but they're not an upper echelon national program, if that makes sense. But they're right there. And I think that's the toughest hill to climb.
Yeah.
And fans will turn on you if you don't get there. And I thought going into this 12 playoff model, which is going to expand again, apparently, you make the playoff, the fans are going to be happy, everything's good. But when you go and get embarrassed on national television with your fans seemingly think you're going to go up to Ohio State and win, all of a sudden there's a lot of negativity. Now, I'm not saying they're out on Heupel by any means, but it's almost like Ole Miss fans are more confident in their program. They just missed the playoff. Missouri fans are more confident. They just missed the playoff. Yet Tennessee is the one that made the playoff, but they left such a bad taste in the fans' mouth that they're wondering, where does this program go? And their line of scrimmage, particularly on the offensive side, has been devastated.
Yeah.
The receiving core has been devastated. They had arguably the best running back in the country. He's now in the NFL. So there's some doubt on whether Tennessee can repeat another playoff run. But if they do, I think you have to kind of vault. I don't know why Josh Heupel doesn't get the respect, but if they can go to the playoffs 2 years in a row with this level of turnover, particularly on the offensive side of the football, I think he's cemented himself as one of the top 10, maybe even the top 5 coach in this game right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a top 10 coach in the sport right now. I truly do, especially because of what Tennessee was when he got there. And then 2 of the last 3 seasons, double-digit wins, made the playoff, New Year's Six bowl win, and he's done it with a bunch of different quarterbacks. I align a lot with what you just said. I trust, I think, the big picture with Heupel because they're always going to have a quarterback. The way they're recruiting right now on the line of scrimmage, I mean, their most recent recruiting class, 1 was the highest ranked under Heupel. 2, their top 2 commits were on the offensive and defensive line. So I trust like the vision. The tough part for me is in 2025, for them to get back to the playoff, I would need to see a lot more from Nico that I'm still projecting that he can do, but it's all happening in my mind's eye. Like I haven't seen it happen on the field just yet. And the defense was awesome last year. And it'd be great if it was awesome again, but I don't know if that's what you want to depend on if you're a Tennessee fan. Where are you on Nico? Are you thinking he could be a top guy in the conference, or are you thinking, hey, I need to see a little bit more from the guy, kind of where I'm sitting right now?
Well, going back to what I said, if you're either elite or you're trash.
Yeah.
Which, again, I don't believe in that, but a lot of people do. So that automatically puts Nico in the trash category for not Tennessee fans, but I see it a lot from SEC. I think with the NIL, with all the hype, with Tennessee fans, all the expectations they put on Nico, all of a sudden this guy's a bust. He can't play. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
I think he was a freshman. I think he led his team to the playoff, and they wouldn't have got there without him last year.
No.
Now, he wasn't the driving force, but who is in their first freshman year as a quarterback in this conference? It's basically unheard of. So I think he's got the potential to be one of the best. And if he is, Tennessee can do that, but you're putting a lot on his shoulders. Again, they're probably going to have 4 new starting offensive linemen. They're going to have basically an entirely new receiving core, and their star running back's gone. Yeah. So can he do it all himself? This is not a game where you can do it yourself. unless you're Cam Newton or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And he's far from that at this point in his career. So I would put him probably in the top 5 of the SEC quarterbacks, which this is a really good year for SEC quarterbacks. He's got the potential to be higher, but I don't think we've seen enough to put him much higher than probably number 5.
And it's tough because of what you just said. When Nico got to Tennessee, everyone was expecting him to be the equivalent of a Cam Newton in terms of impact. They're saying, oh, this is, the top player in America. This is a guy with, that we beat out Alabama and Georgia and whoever else for. Like, this is supposed to be the guy that changes the entire complexion of what Tennessee football is. And you just mentioned, like, he was good last year. Like, they made the college football playoff, but with what his expectations were coming in, it's a very, very difficult bar to reach. The other thing I'd say is there's no Jalen Hyatt for him. Like, we give Hendon Hooker so much love. He deserves it. He's a guy that had played, 1, a lot of football, and 2, had a Blitnikoff Award wide receiver next to him in that formation, and also had a Cedric Tillman, a Bruno. Like, they were stacked in 2022. That wasn't the case last year.
And I think the big question for Tennessee fans, looking back at last year, Heupel clearly changed the scheme to kind of protect him. Now, was that because they had Dylan Sampson and they had this great offensive line and they had a great defense that they could rely on, or was it because they didn't trust Nico? It could be both, or it could just be you're playing to your strengths, which a lot of coaches don't do. And I think had Lane Kiffin done that a little bit more last year, I think Ole Miss would have made the playoffs. So I credit Heupel for making those adjustments, but that's what's in everybody's mind. Did they have to protect him because Nico is not who they thought he would be? That's the $1 million question going into next year. Do they unleash him? Do they give him more free reign? And they need receivers like Mike Matthews, who maybe could be a Jalen Hyatt type. Jalen Hyatt wasn't Jalen Hyatt right out the gate either. And people were wondering, he's supposed to be the critical piece in this offense. He was not that effective his first year. Second year, arguably the best season for a Tennessee receiver ever.
100%. Yeah, and I think what you just said is on the money in the sense that you look at how Tennessee ran their offense last year. Mike, last year, 4 wins for Tennessee, scoring less than 30 points. The entirety of Josh Heupel's time in Knoxville before last season, 1 win that way. Yeah. So they totally changed, like you just said, the approach for how they were going to win football games. When you got a top 5 defense too, I don't think it's malpractice to say, hey, we're going to let our first year starting quarterback in arguably the toughest conference in America, we're going to let him hand the ball off to Dylan Sampson. We're going to maybe take a little bit more off his plate. But next year, I think it's got to be Nico driven. I think it has to be.
And let's credit, they got coaches on the other sideline too. This is the SEC adjusting to Heupel.
Yeah.
We're not going to let you beat us over the top. You got to dink and dunk. You got to go 12 plays, 14 plays if you're going to score a touchdown on us. And that's what they've had to do more often than not. That explosive that we saw in 2022, the explosive plays have not been there because of the way the defenses have adjusted, playing that 2-man over the top. So how does Heupel combat that? That's another $1 million question.
We're going to find out, man. But they're the most curious team. They're one of the biggest wild cards to me in the SEC. Like, they could be a team that gets back to the playoff.
Yeah.
They could fall back to earth and win 7 games. Like that would be surprising if they won 7 games, but I think the delta between those two is very, very possible in terms of what they could be in 2025. Let's pivot to another team in the SEC. We spoke last summer about Auburn. I was buying stock. Hand up, I whiffed, swung and missed, folks, on Hugh Freeze and what they were last season. I'm ready to get hurt again. I think that Auburn in 2025, I think they've done a lot of the right things behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And I'm not much of a gardener. Like, I don't have a green thumb, but I do know the basics. If you water a tree for a long time, you may not see some fruit for the better part of a year, maybe 2 years. I think they see some fruit this year. Where are you at on Hugh Freeze? Because I know you were very bearish a season ago. Are you still not really feeling the vibes with Freeze, or where are you at with him?
JD, can you read
what's he pulling up some numbers here? Yeah.
What's his record at Auburn, and what's his record in the SEC?
His record when he inherited Auburn is now at 11-14.
And his all-time, and this is I didn't omit games that
yes.
got vetoed by the NCAA or anything. What's his SEC record?
We got him at 24-32 all time.
Why do people have this guy as some elite coach? I'm not saying it's not trash or elite, but he is average. And his resume is built on he beat Nick Saban twice. Well, guess what? He lost to Vanderbilt twice too during that time.
Sure.
He won 10 games one year at Ole Miss. He lost to Memphis that year. You know what I mean? He's a good coach, but he's far from elite. And all I see from him is throwing people under the bus. And I'm just trying to figure out who's he going to throw under the bus this year because he's fired everybody or got rid of his quarterback. And hey, we got a new quarterback that what was the problem last year at Auburn? Turnovers.
Yeah.
So let's go get the most turnover prone quarterback in the portal. And I like Jackson Arnold. I think he was kind of done dirty, not dirty, but the situation at Oklahoma. They fired his coordinator halfway through the year. The offensive line was a train wreck.
Mm-hmm.
All the receivers got hurt. I don't think they had a difference maker at running back. How do you evaluate Jackson Arnold after that? I don't know. He could be the most underrated quarterback in the country. He could be maybe the worst in the SEC. Like, he legitimately looked like it at times.
Mm-hmm.
They had to go to a true freshman, Michael Hawkins, who was a dynamic athlete, but a very limited in terms of his development as a quarterback at this point in his career. And he was an upgrade.
Yeah.
So what is Auburn? I think a lot of it relies on Jackson Arnold and how quickly Hugh Freeze throws him under the bus, because you know what's coming. You know what's coming. They open at Baylor. That's such a tricky game. And this is one of the years. Auburn always does better when they have Georgia and Alabama at home, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two big games. These are the years they make them run. It's the years they're away. That was another reason I was down on Auburn. I was like, they ain't winning at Georgia. They ain't winning at Alabama. Of course not. Of course, they nearly did. But this is a year. If it's not this year, when's it going to be for old Hugh Freeze? And man, it's one disappointing loss after another, in my opinion. I remember all last year we were saying, oh, they're going to be 4-0. It's a cakewalk.
Yeah.
They got Cal, Arkansas at home. Come on, those are easy. They lost both of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So he's going to lose games he shouldn't. He's going to win a game or two he probably shouldn't. He's an inconsistent coach. This is an inconsistent program. And my favorite thing to say about Hugh Freeze right now is I think he's doing a heck of a job loading up the roster for the next coach. It's probably going to be John Summerall in about a year.
Well, that's the interesting thing is you look, I mean, let's just say Hugh Freeze is good coach is what, B+ territory? Is that a fair place to put him in your mind? B+?
No.
B minus. Where are you putting Hugh Freeze? Give him a letter grade. B-. So B- coach.
But
called it
A+ recruiter.
A+ recruiter. So he has what, A- roster, B+ roster at this point?
I'd say B+, A-.
So I'm wondering, good coach, really good roster, massive question mark at quarterback. We'll see what that is. That's a huge variable. I'm not so sure Auburn can't go find a way to win 8 games. Now, I said that a season ago. Again, I'm putting my face back in the fan. If they win 8 games, I'm like, okay, they just missed a bowl game and had a top 10 class. Like, do they end up finishing with like a top 5 class if they win 8 games? Like, that's the curious part to me about Auburn is, okay, can the roster elevate them to a place that they just haven't been in the last 3, 4, 5 years?
If they don't go 8-4 or better, it's a horrible job, I feel like.
Absolutely. It has to be at least 8 wins. Yeah. In my opinion.
Unless they have to work around the quarterback who may not be very good. I think he's supremely talented. And one thing that really caught my attention last offseason, maybe it's because Oklahoma's new, I don't know, but they brought Jackson Arnold as a freshman to SEC Media Days. Yeah. And I don't know if they understood how unprecedented that was. I've never seen a freshman quarterback at SEC Media Days till Jackson Arnold. It may have happened somewhere, but to my knowledge, that was the first time. And I thought, man, they really believe in this kid. And then a couple months later, they didn't believe in him at all. So again, where's the truth with Jackson Arnold? I tend to think he's a really good player. And I think he fits what Auburn is going to ask him to do a heck of a lot better than what Oklahoma was asking him to do. And I'm rooting for him, but I just don't know how you put stock in it right now.
And the psychological side too for Jackson Arnold, because after getting benched in the SEC,
right,
and then being asked to go save essentially what Auburn is in 2025, you got to think the confidence is starting to, you would hope it's starting to bounce back under a new staff. So if he has success, Hugh Freeze deserves a ton of credit, but if he doesn't, then you and I are aligned in the sense that the vibes may not be as great on the Plains.
And I said a lot of bad things about him. He was a hero against Alabama.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Again, so he's beating Alabama. We're Auburn. Let's go get him.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. And they had a sack rate allowed of 13% last year. I mean, you put Peyton Manning back there. He may have some issues when he's getting sacked 13% of the time, but we move on from one side of the Iron Bowl to the other. I'm not concerned about Bama just yet. I'm not. Now, last year wasn't great. Last year was bad in every single sense of the word. You lose to Oklahoma, we just mentioned, lose to Vanderbilt.
Yep.
The fact they weren't able to bounce back after the loss of Vanderbilt the way that I would have liked to see them bounce back, and they just sort of took South Carolina down to the wire before South Carolina was South Carolina. I'm not convinced that DeBoer is all the way moved in yet. Jalen Milroe, I think, held them back tremendously last year. He's a guy that wasn't really built for DeBoer's system. Now you got your new OC. You would hope you can have a better receiving core.
Yeah.
I'm not selling my DeBoer stock just yet. Where are you on the Tide?
Well, you hit on something important there. Milroe held him back. Who's that on? To me, that's on DeBoer.
Interesting. Okay.
You adjust to your talent in college football. You know, if you don't, that's a poor coaching job. And man, I keep in mind, I'm not the one having to pay all these buyouts, but this is another guy I'd probably fire if they don't make the playoff
next year.
He's gone.
You're firing DeBoer.
Go from the greatest dynasty in college football history to missing the playoff 2 years in a row, then he's not cut out for this. And I'll tell you, JD, people that matter down there in Alabama, they hate him. They hate him. They hate how different he is from Nick Saban. So the people that really matter, they will make moves if they have to. They've got to make the playoff. And I've seen several different metrics that rate roster talent that have Alabama as the number one roster in the country for next year.
Interesting.
Now, I don't know if how accurate. I've seen two different models that say that. I don't know if I buy that, but they are probably top five without a doubt. And every big game they won last year, what did they do? Like the Georgia game, which they blew nearly.
Yeah.
They turn around and lose to Vanderbilt. You know, they beat Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Oh, what a great win. Then they get pants by Michigan. You know what I mean? It's just every time they did something right, they did something wrong. That's on coaching.
Yeah.
The inconsistencies, they were undisciplined. You said it yourself, Jalen Milroe, who, at times looked like the best player in the country. Against Georgia, he looked like the best player in the country. Well, maybe his receiver was, but he'd be number two. Then at times, he looked totally clueless back there, like against Oklahoma. So that's on coaching, in my opinion. Don't put the guy out there if you can't trust him to execute your system.
My concern is, well, who else are you putting out there? Because apparently you didn't feel good enough about a Ty Simpson or an Austin Mack, or you go down the list there of Alabama's quarterback depth chart a season ago to roll with. But Alabama last year, trying to run DeBoer's system, they just didn't have a guy to do it. And then on top of that, didn't have any receivers to do it. Like Ryan Williams had half of Jalen Milroe's touchdown passes a season ago. Like he threw 16, and Ryan Williams, who's 17, every single broadcast beat that into our school. He caught 8 of them. And so I'm sitting here, I'm like, man, I don't doubt DeBoer can coach football. The guy's like 116-13 all time. The question was, could he recruit? And he just landed a top 3 class. So to me, it's still too early for us to even know
what he is. Can I take issue with that, though?
Please, yeah, I'd love to.
Because it bothers me when they say, well, DeBoer, man, he just landed the top class. DeBoer, the way I hear it, I don't know if there's a Alabama high school head coach that even knows who DeBoer is. Like, I don't think he's out there. They all know Hugh Freeze. Alabama landed the number 1 class.
Yeah,
Alabama's got the resources. Every one of these kids grew up. Alabama is the program. Alabama's offering us, I don't know how much money they got. According to the AD, he's collecting coins on the side of the road for their NIL. So I don't know if it's paychecks, but I would imagine there's paychecks coming there because they don't want to have to buy him out of his massive buyout. Again, what did I say about Florida and LSU? It's much more financially responsible to buy players. So they're funneling it more to the players. That's how you get a number 1 class. You come to Bama. This is the program. It's in the SEC. Again, I'm not saying DeBoer is like inept at coaching or recruiting, but I'm saying I don't give him credit for number. I think it's Alabama. I think it's the brand. I think it's the logo. I think it's the SEC is why Alabama had a number 1 class.
I think there was the Bama bump for them, like you just mentioned. Like the logo definitely helps, but if they don't have success this year, that bump's gone. Because every recruit is saying, well, that was Bama under Saban. I still like the logo, but they just missed the playoff 2 years in a row, and we're going to see them just plummet down the recruiting rankings. Yeah. Again, I'm still we got to see who the quarterback is, but I'm not so sure that Bama's not going to, with how much talent they still have in-house, with all the dudes with a lot of stars next to their name, they're not going to be in better position with Ryan Grubb now calling the offense. But you're saying after next year, like, hey, if it doesn't go how I want it to go, if I'm an Alabama fan, I'm ready to cut ties with DeBoer.
Let's call Urban. I mean, he doesn't have a job right now.
Get him off the big noon set and say, hey, get on out here to Alabama. That would be wild. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely wild. Okay, well, we'll see what happens with Alabama here in 2025. From one SEC power to the SEC runner-up. Where are you at on Texas? Like, you talk about being elite versus being trash, and everyone had a take and still has a take on Arch Manning. Are you thinking Texas is a team that can be sustainable and be back where they were a season ago playing for the title or whatever that looks like here in the future? Or are you more so thinking see a little regression without a Quinn Ewers, without a lot of those receivers they had from a season ago?
Yeah, well, the way college football is set up today, and it could change tomorrow. It's like seemingly changing by the month. But I think it really suits programs like Texas for two huge reasons: NIL and the support and all that. And they have not won a championship. And that's why you got Alabama AD out here asking for coins for the NIL, because those fans have won so many championships. I don't think they're eager to donate. Georgia, same deal. This is the first time Georgia's really went into the portal. Kirby, we don't have to do that, which he hasn't had to. So more power to him. But Texas, they don't have those championships. So they got that money down there. They got Arch Manning. They got Sarkisian, who is probably the best play caller in the sport.
Yeah.
I still kind of reserve judgment on how good he is as a head coach. I think he's obviously much improved. But people that put him like top 3, I think that's kind of ridiculous.
Interesting. Okay, I had him top 3, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
One of those.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
Let me ask you this: what game did they win last year where they were an underdog?
Where they were an underdog? I mean, if you're a good team, you're not an underdog, right? I mean, if you have a roster that's put together the way that Texas's was, like, you're not an underdog in a lot of games.
Well, when you're spending $20 million and you lose the 3 games you're underdog, then that's a failing of coaching again.
So which games are you saying he's a failing of coach?
Well, he can't beat Georgia, and the only one that really mattered was Ohio State. He couldn't beat them either.
Sure. So in that sense, do you put that on Steve Sarkisian, or do you put that on, hey, we got us down to the spot where it comes down to margins, the ball bounces a certain way? Like the Quinn Ewers strip sack fumble for a touchdown where they're, down there on the, it was 7-yard line. Like, and that's a whole, we can go back and forth about that. But that was something where I'm like, hey, if I'm a Texas fan, I just sit back and say, it's Ohio State's year. Like Jack Story, 80-yard strip sack for a touchdown. Okay, like this must be the Ryan Day special.
Right.
But when it comes to Steve Sarkisian, I'm looking at how he has continued to replenish that roster and have the line of scrimmage at a spot to compete in the SEC. I look at the way that he's got that quarterback room set up for the future. I think Sark, what he's done the last 2 years, making the playoff each of the last 2 years, I think he is absolutely a top 3 coach in the sport, 110%. But you're not so keen on the guy. Is it the Ohio State game that irks you? Is it the Georgia game?
It's the fact that they got a cakewalk schedule and they beat who they were supposed to beat. And I don't know why the SEC set it up this way and they decided to give Oklahoma the gauntlet, but it is what it is. And they got it again this year. Of course, they play Ohio State to their credit, but again, he doesn't win enough big games for me. And to me, that's coaching. You spend $20 million, you finish in the Final Four. Is that what you're spending $20 million for?
So here, go ahead. I cut you off. Sorry. Go ahead.
I think you're paying all that money to win the national championship, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he lost the coaches that are ahead of him, though. Like, for the record, I have Kirby as number 1. Mm-hmm. I have Ryan Day at 2. And so if you're losing to the coaches that I think currently you're behind, if I'm a Texas fan, I'm not okay with it. But sitting here with no dog in the fight, like, I don't think any less of Steve Sarkisian for losing to a ready-made national title roster in Ohio State and the best coach in the sport right now in Kirby Smart.
Yeah. Well, and then I even go back the year before, losing to Brent Venables, losing to Washington.
That's bad,
They were favored in that one,
absolutely.
Too. I mean, I'm just saying, in these big-time games, I don't know if he's there. And again, I'm not saying he's horrible. I would probably put him closer to 10th than I would number 1.
Really?
If that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Okay. You have him top 5?
No.
Top 7? Where is he in your top 10? Off the top of the head, where would you put Steve Sarkisian?
Well, again, I try not to speak out of school. I really don't follow the rest of the country.
Sure.
I do SEC.
That's fine, yeah.
So I put him 3rd in the SEC behind Kirby and Lane Kiffin. I think if you put Lane Kiffin at Texas, I think he would have already won a national championship. You put Sark at Ole Miss, I don't think they would have done anything close to what they're doing right now in Oxford.
What has Lane Kiffin done that is more impressive than Steve Sarkisian winning the Big 12, making the SEC title his first year in the conference, making the playoff twice? Like, is it a resources thing for you? Because I don't think what you're saying is all that unheard of. Like, I think Lane Kiffin and what he's done at Ole Miss, no secret, Ole Miss resources are not the same as Texas resources.
Right.
Is that what it is to you, or where do you fall in that conversation?
It's the overall program management, being ahead of NIL, transfer portal, program building. I mean, Ole Miss was – remember, the entire staff got fired last time because a guy dog peed on the field.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And now they are the third most winningest program in the SEC over the last 4 years, behind only Georgia and Alabama. And that is largely due to Lane Kiffin and the program culture there. And remember, Pete Golding, Alabama fans were ready to run him off. I think they would give anything to get Pete Golding back, because Ole Miss is better on defense than Alabama now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think the guy really has – now, he fell completely on his face last year. How he didn't – remember we were talking about Graves? Again, I love Lane Kiffin. I hope he's at Ole Miss forever, because he's great for guys like you and I. I hope this doesn't happen to 40 or 50 years. But on his grave is going to say they missed the playoffs in 2024 with a top 5 roster in college football. That's disgraceful. So that is bad, but I mean, they whooped Georgia. The problem is they fell short in critical games. I think their quarterback, which is apparently rising up the draft boards, he came up short in just so many big games.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that was a failing of Kiffin, not, like I said with Heupel, not adjusting to the strengths of his team, being so aggressive on 4th down. And really what really killed them, I don't know why more people don't talk about this, they were so ready to bash Judkins and throw him under the bus. And I know he, behind the scenes, sounds like, it's not like he was an A-plus character guy for NIL purposes, but the guy just won a national championship. And where was Ole Miss' biggest failing? Was short yardage, goal line. Had they had that Judkins last year, they would have made the playoff.
Maybe they beat Kentucky. I know everyone's dunking on Steve. I mean, the Steve Sarkisian Venables thing is back, but lose to Kentucky. I mean, that's something I'm excited to hear more about that with you as we get further and further into this this part of the year. Let's talk about A&M a little bit though, because you and I were getting ready for this show. I sent you over a rundown, and you said, "Hey, let's throw A&M in there." A&M's kind of had this 7-5, 8-4 label. I really like Mike Elko. Like, I look to the next 3 years of college football. I think they're a top 10 team. I think that we talk about resources, we talk about the staff and the structure and the culture and all those things. Like, I think Mike Elko brings exactly what they've been missing. I get that it's kind of unpopular to talk about them being a force in the SEC in college football, but like Mike Elko wasn't there for the 7-5s and the 8-4s as a head coach. Where are you on A&M?
Well, here's the thing. You're right. We can't blame Mike Elko for the failures of A&M in the past, but he got off to a great start, and then he just repeated the process.
Sure.
And I should have looked the stat up to get it exactly right, but shout out Brad Powers. He found this stat, and I've been quoting it all off season. I think it's 25 of the last 27 seasons, A&M has lost 4 or more games. 25 out of 27. So that's an A&M problem. And they have got to shed this 8. I call them Texas 8-4 now. I mean, how could you call them anything other than that? That's what they are every year, including last year where they were 7-1. They were in the driver's seat for the SEC championship. They were in the driver's seat for the college football playoff. And they lost every meaningful game starting in November.
But what does that mean? It's an A&M problem? Because I'm looking at A&M, I'm like, okay, now they have a different AD, a different head coach. They got a different quarterback. Like, I don't think that the uniform is the problem. Like, I don't think the place is snake bitten. Like, they were also in a spot where, now granted, to your point, they came up short in the biggest moment, but they were also in a spot where if they beat Texas, they're in Atlanta, play for the college football playoff. Like, that in itself, your first year under new head coach, I'm sitting here saying, I love Texas A&M having that jumping off point under their first year in the Elko era. Like, that to me gives me a lot of confidence. They had a better season at A&M last year, as good a season, I should say, as Jimbo Fisher ever had at A&M if COVID never happened. Like, COVID was the one year where if you're an A&M fan, you're like, okay, hey, this is where we get excited. This is where things start to get rolling. But last year for Elko, like, they went 8-4, and that was as good a year as Jimbo Fisher ever had outside of the COVID year.
Yeah, speaking of COVID, I mean, it was such an outlier. Jimbo looked like a good coach that year. But, yeah, so it sounds like you're not superstitious, and I'm not necessarily either, but I'm a little stitious.
Okay.
And, yeah, again, 25 out of 27, 8-4. That's a program problem. And
well, what does that even mean?
We have seen someone get off to a hot start. We've seen Jimbo get off to a hot start. Remember, I think it was his second game. They took Clemson. That was, I think, a future national championship. They took him to the wire, and we're thinking, oh, God, he's got it rolling already at College Station, and yet they never get over that hump. And I don't know if the belief's there. I don't know if it's a cursed program, but they're right there with Texas. Haven't won a championship in forever. Have NIL, have all the resources, the facility. The stadium's fantastic. It may be a top 3 stadium in the SEC, if not the country, yet they cannot stop losing in critical situations. So you got to shed that somehow. And I don't know if there's demons in the building. They need to have an exorcism. I don't know if it's all those male cheerleaders they have. I don't know. They got to mix something up because again, I believe the stat is 25 out of 27 years they've lost 4 games or more, and that's unacceptable. And I think Mike Elko, it's way too early to put him into the elite category, but his early resume at Duke and the start they got at A&M suggests he is an elite coach. They're going to have all the talent in the world. This is a huge year for A&M. And now that Texas, they had a 12-year head start on them.
Yeah.
Never made the SEC championship. Texas makes it year 1. A&M still hasn't made it. Again, that's not a Mike Elko problem. That's an A&M problem.
It's an A&M problem to a degree, but I'm sitting here saying, speaking in Texas terms, a lot of people kind of thought the same thing about Texas for a while. And now they had the national title, so there's some differences there. But there was always this discussion around Texas of, well, it's just the logo is why they get thrown into the preseason conversation. There's always this preseason hype, and then Texas wins 7 games, win 8 games. Maybe it's real bad and they miss a bowl game like Steve Sarkisian's first year. But to me, the difference with Texas, how they got it right, how they fixed the Texas problem was they hired the right guy. And I'm sitting here from an A&M fan, I'm saying, scanning through the TexAgs message boards, I think we hired the right guy, would be my feel. Like I said, brings culture, brings toughness. At Duke, he did way more than you should ever do as a Duke head coach. Like for them to win 9 games and to do with Riley Leonard what they did to get as far as they did, and him having success he had at Notre Dame, like I give Mike Elko even credit for that. So I see what you're saying. I have a hard time buying
but everything you just said,
that College Station snake bitten.
Everything you just said, aside from toughness, we could say about Sumlin. We could say about Jimbo. They came in there. I mean, I never even heard of Kevin Sumlin until he was A&M coach. They caught the world on fire. Now, again, maybe we give most of that credit to Johnny Manziel now, but Kevin Sumlin was the coach. And the same thing, Jimbo. I mean, they were much improved right out the gate, and then it just fizzled. So the question is, will it fizzle again under Mike Elko? I'm not rooting for that, but 25 out of 27 suggests that is going to happen. So I don't know how. That's why I wanted to talk about this. I mean, it just feels like that program needs an exorcism or something.
It's a little stitious. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I mean, my one pushback on that when it comes to Jimbo is watching A&M with him as the head coach. I feel like I did not know who that team was. Like there was no identity. There was a plan, there was a strategy, but I couldn't sit down and give you adjectives that I felt like adequately described A&M. And I don't think that was something that you could sit me down and then have 10 other people sit down and give you the same adjectives. I think with Elko, it is structure, it is toughness, it is culture, which are all cliches. But again, I think that's what A&M's been missing. Now, I think what they're missing now is some poise and experience in those big moments. And you hope if you're an A&M fan, that pays off here in the future.
Well, I know for a fact, too, Jimbo got enamored with the stars. Shout out On 3 and the rest of the services. He wanted stars. He wanted 5 stars. How do they fit? Who cares? We want to be number 1. And a lot of these coaches, Nick Saban included, blame Jimbo for how this is all come about. Blowing up the market, paying astronomical figures for these players before they've proven anything in college football. So, thanks, Jimbo. And he got, $90 million, whatever, to who knows what he's doing, but more power to him,
You know what it is to probably get the bad juju out? They probably have to burn that national title plaque that they gave to him, because what it said, like national champs 20, and then it just had
fill in the date,
fill in the blank. And I was like, man, I don't know if you want to do that. A&M fans or A&M folks, if you're listening, let's throw that in the trash. Let's light that on fire. Maybe we can kind of have
an exorcism with that statue. That's what we need to do. Get Billy Lucci to serenade the process.
Get him on the horn. Yeah. Get Billy Lucci out there and make it happen. One more team I want to talk about here, speaking of looking for success in the SEC, one more team that you wanted to make sure we hit on, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Are they built to have sustainable success in the SEC? Where are you at on them?
I don't even know if they're built to have success, because I talked to these Oklahoma fans. They're like, man, we loved the idea of coming to the SEC, everything that was going to bring. Now that they've experienced it for a season, they want out. You know what I mean? Can they even compete in this conference? I mean, I think that's a fair question to be asking right now. And I think Brett Venables, in any other era, I think would have been viewed as a borderline elite coach. He may be the best defensive mind. Well, probably you still got to put Kirby over him.
But he's in that conversation.
Venables is right there with him.
Yeah.
What he did at Clemson and what he's actually doing at Oklahoma. You remember, Oklahoma was soft as tissue paper under old Lincoln Riley. They have fixed that. But he's not on board with the NIL. he's not on board with the transfer portal, and that's fine. Most of the audience is not on board with that. But if you're going to be that and you're going to lead this program, that's a huge mistake. Again, that's why I credit Lane Kiffin, because he does these things. Sarkisian does these things. Heupel, they lean into it. I'm just wondering if Venables is built for this. And it's so funny because I talk to their fans. They are totally against NIL because I think they're getting that from their coach. They're getting it from their administration. Yet the way I hear it, I mean, it was Oklahoma that was cheating for 100 years. Now that it's all out in the open, now they're upset with it,
That's the tough part for me around Oklahoma is if we want to hold Brent Venables to the Oklahoma standard, and we should, they should expect to be in the conversation every year for conference titles. They should expect to compete for the playoff and all that because that's what that logo demands. But if we're not going to arm him with the proper NIL resources, it doesn't matter if it's Venables, if it's Nick Saban, if it's Urban Meyer. Like if they don't give him the tools to be able to compete with some of these, big boys across the SEC that they want to eventually beat, like I don't know how you even move forward. It's not a Venables problem to me. Going back to our A&M conversation, now I'm saying it's an Oklahoma problem at that point.
Right. Well, I think this is again, the sport could change tomorrow, but I think the way it is structured today, it's hard to ask people for money when they don't have belief in the direction of the program and the coach. And every Oklahoma fan that I speak to, they like Brent Venables, the guy. They question Brent Venables, the head coach. So they're not giving right now. And why would you? If you're an Arkansas fan, I love Sam Pittman to death. I hope he's there forever. I hope he wins more games. Otherwise, he won't be. But why would you give to that? You're throwing money down a well is what you're doing. Now, if you're Texas, let's go win something. If you're A&M, you're Tennessee, again, we are so close, but we're coming up short. Let's donate. That's where the sport's at right now. And how can you ask Oklahoma fans to give right now?
And I'm not so sure that this isn't the year where they jumpstart some of that belief. Like going out and landing a John Mateer, and I'm sure he wasn't a free 99 price point. I'm sure he probably came with a little low price tag to him. That to me just gives me so much confidence because we talked about it earlier, but last year, just so much that you were hoping for coming into 2024. So much that you were trying to hypothetically put together in your mind and say, okay, if Jackson Arnold plays this way and if the line gels this way. I sat here last year and I said they're going to go 6-6. They could be better if things break a certain way, but they're going to be 6-6. And we caught. I mean, you would have thought that I cursed Oklahoma and just said they're never going to win anything ever again. But it played out how it played out, and I'm changing my tune on them this year because I think you have a lot more that you can bank on. I bank on John Mateer. You mentioned Brent Venables in the defense. I think that's going to be in a much better place. I'm not saying they win the SEC, but we mentioned Tennessee in the wild card they are. I view Oklahoma in that same way. I think John Mateer is so good, and a lot of people haven't had a chance to see him. I think he could totally change what Oklahoma is in 25, and they could be a 9-win football team.
Yeah, and they may start a trend. You land the quarterback. You land his offensive coordinator. You land his quarterback coach. They're all in Norman now. So you can jumpstart the installation of the offense in the spring. Well, I mean, you won't have to jumpstart it for the quarterback. It's getting everybody else on the same page. Now, the way I understand it, they made him keep the offensive line coach. So that could be a failing. Now, he has a great reputation. So
he's a good track record.
I'm not saying he's a bad offensive line coach, but how does that gel with the offense and the quarterback and the play caller? That's going to be the $1,000,000 question for Norman. But that's why I'm optimistic if I'm an Oklahoma fan, because of John Mateer, because of the system. It should be a day one install essentially for the key pieces of the Oklahoma football program, which could lead to a lot better success right out the gate on the offensive side of the football. And they just need to be competent on offense. I mean, they were just so bad with the defense they should have with Brent Venables. This could be an 8-9 win team. I mean, this could be the team no one's talking about that surprises everybody in the SEC next year.
And Mike, you know what happens if they do win 9 games? At that point, the free trial's up. If you're the powers that be at Oklahoma, you put your hand out and you say, "Hey, you want to win some more games? Hey, how about you go ahead and put the money in the bag and we'll make sure we get you that." But the free trial's up. Subscription is you have to pay for some more wins going forward. The schedule we had up there was something to be noted. Michigan, you got to play them. You got to play Auburn, and they're kind of a wild card. Obviously, you're going to play Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Bama. You finish with LSU. They're in the same boat to me as Florida. If they go 9-3, they're in the discussion for the playoff.
Let me ask you this, because this is something that we've talked on our show. October 11th, they play Texas.
Yep.
Is Oklahoma going to be favored in any game the rest of the way?
I could
as
see
of today.
them. You know what? I'm pretty bearish on Ole Miss. I could see them being favored at home against Ole Miss. I could see them being favored against Missouri. Tennessee probably is a 2.5 point game. Maybe you lean Tennessee because it's in Neyland. But no, I see. I mean, it's not going to be a bunch of just layups for Oklahoma the rest of the way. And no. I mean, I think they're probably favored a couple of games.
So we're saying probably 2 and 5, just spread wise.
Yeah,
potentially after October 11th. I mean, good luck. You know what I mean? So you're going to have an astronomically good season, and kind of win 4 of those last 7.
So I guess that depends on how you start. Then, like, do you think you can beat Michigan your second game of the season at home? And
he better.
What is Bryce Underwood in that spot? Right. Can you beat Auburn? Because if they roll into Texas and they're 5-0, and then let's say that you end up beating Ole Miss, you're at 6. You beat Missouri, you're at 7. Yeah, you got to find a way to beat either Tennessee or South Carolina. I mean, I guess we're just talking through the back half of the schedule now. I think that the uncertainty at quarterback, like, I have no idea who Bama's going to be. I have no idea who Ole Miss is going to be. I have no idea who Missouri's going to be with Bo Prabula. Like, I get the logos are intriguing. I don't trust a lot of those quarterbacks, and Nico Iamaleava, unfortunately, is included in that discussion for me.
How about that September 20th, though? Auburn comes to Oklahoma. Who's under more pressure, Hugh Freeze, Brett Venables, or even you could throw Jackson Arnold into that conversation? You know what I mean? What a game.
How about the revenge spot there for Jackson Arnold? The chance to just how do you like me now to the folks in Norman.
He may get his ex-coach fired that day. If they beat him that bad.
Can you imagine the plot there? The Jackson Arnold movie, with that being the final scene where he says, "You didn't believe in me, and now you got to go look for a new job." Well, Mike, one more question for you, man, before we get you out of here. We appreciate all your time. This has been an absolute blast.
Yeah, this is great.
We've talked
much better than my mom's basement.
And it's a nice basement, by the way. It's a great production setup. Shout out to your mom. Is there a team across the country? Because we've just talked SEC for the last hour or so. If you're thinking SEC boogeyman, is there an Ohio State? Is it a Penn State? In 2025, who is the biggest obstacle for the SEC getting back to the mountaintop and winning a national title in 25?
I think the only one, Michigan, obviously 2 years ago, and then completely fell off the map. I think Ohio State, man, their fans they watch my show more than SEC fans, just to dunk on me every show. I think they're going to do the same thing. I think they're going to fall, especially opening against Texas. I think they're going to come to earth. I'm not saying they're going to be awful. They're in an awful league, so they'll get back to the playoff, but they're not going to be a national championship
league on the Big Ten.
Oh, come on. Indiana, come on. That was their third best team. Give me a break. And James Franklin, don't get me started on him. That's supposedly our next one. Isn't he like 1 for 20 in top 10 games or something crazy like that?
It's not good. It's not good.
Yeah, that's your elite coach up there. But if there's one program that I think everyone should be scared of, that I don't know why they've not quite gotten it right, but they're so close, I think it's Oregon. Because I think Phil Knight will outspend anybody to win a championship before he passes. So I think Oregon with Dan Lanning, before he comes to the he's going to come to the SEC. He'll be the next Georgia coach, or A&M if it doesn't work out for Elko. We'll get him eventually. But for now, I think he's a rising star in this profession. He's got all the money in the world to play with. I think Oregon is that team to watch.
I think Dan Lanning not taking the Bama job, whether it was a real offer to talk it through, to not even entertain the Alabama job, he looks smarter and smarter every day with Nike money and with those resources and the way that college football is trending. Like, Oregon is, I know that it's in Eugene, so you're not having a bunch of ballers in your backyard, but it don't matter when you can do what you do on the NIL front and have that brand. So I'm with you. I think Oregon's
have you been up
wagon.
There?
I haven't. Have you?
Tennessee played a couple years ago up there. Tennessee was like a 30-point underdog. They jumped out to a 3-0 lead. I was talking so much trash. And then Oregon scored like 60 consecutive unanswered points. So, those people are fantastic. I love the scenery. I loved everything about my trip up there. It's awesome.
That's the Mariota game. Is that right? When they broke out like the neon yellow uniforms?
When I saw that in person, I said, if you're not running this offense in college, you're a fool. This is the future. And it's kind of turned into that.
Absolutely has. It absolutely has. Well, Mike, we appreciate you, man, making some time, man, and coming down here in studio and chopping it up.
Yeah.
Andy Nari back on the airwaves for you tomorrow. We appreciate y'all spending some time with us. Again, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hey, go subscribe to that SEC podcast. Mike and the team doing a phenomenal job. And you undersold the production value too. Like, your mom's basement. I've seen your studio. It's next level. I love it. So we appreciate you coming down here, man, and talking some ball and chopping it up, and we'll do it again here real soon.
Yeah, anytime.
Awesome. Well, for us here at the On3 Studios, for SEC Mike, producer River Bailey on the 1s and 2s, we'll keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all.